Hello all. In this lecture, we'll see about pseudocode. So we'll see how to write a pseudocode. So we'll see what is a pseudocode. So it is a methodology that allows the programmer to represent the implementation of an algorithm. So in the previous lectures, we have seen how to write an algorithm and how to draw the flowchart. So we can represent the implementation of that algorithm using a pseudocode, and it can be considered as a false code or a representation of code. So after writing this algorithm, you usually do programming, or we write it in some programming language. But before writing into programming language, some cases we would like to write the pseudocode. And this pseudocode is a false code. This is not the actual code. This cannot be run on any systems, or we cannot compile the code. It's a false code, or it can be called as a representation of that code. It is not depending, it is language independent code. It does not depend on any programming language. And this pseudocode can be understood by even a layman with some school level programming knowledge. So usually when organizations design this, people used to write the pseudocode of the languages. So this can be understood by even a layman. Even with basic school level programming knowledge itself, they can write the pseudocode. So it is implementation of an algorithm in the form of annotations and informative text written in plain English. So it will contain some annotations, and also the everything is written in simple or plain English itself. There is no syntax like any of the programming language. So when you learn C or any other programming languages, some of you might have already learned this some programming language. So there is some syntax and all. Here there is no syntax. There is no standard notation and all, and there is no generalized standard and all. People can follow any method, but we'll be seeing some common methodology kind of thing in this lecture. So advantages of writing the pseudocode is it improves the readability of the program. So when some people write a pseudocode, we can understand the code much better, in a much better manner. And also it acts as a bridge between the program and the algorithm of flowchart. So after writing an algorithm of flowchart, we need not go directly into a program. We can write the pseudocode of that program. So that will give that will improve the readability of that program. So it acts as a bridge. So it falls in between this program and flowchart, or program and algorithm. And this makes the code construction phase easier. So from pseudocode, it will be very easy to write programs. And it also acts as a starting point for documentation. So usually when you go to organizations and all, they usually write the pseudocode, and this pseudocode will be documented. So it will be better to document the pseudocode. So when you write softwares and all, usually we need to document everything. So pseudocode is the best thing to document a program. And also easier bug detection and fixing is possible in the case of pseudocode. In the case of algorithm, we can find the bugs and all, but we have already seen flowchart is better in finding out bugs and all. So pseudocode is much more better in finding to these bugs and also to fix those errors and all. So there are some disadvantages also. It does not provide a visual representation of the logic of programming. There is no visual representation of the logic. So what is happening inside is not shown in the pseudocode, and also there is no proper format for writing the pseudocode. There is no particular format and all. Each individual will be writing in his own language and all. So there is no particular format, there is no generalized format or generalized structure and all. People can write in any manner. So every company or organization follow their own standards for writing the pseudocode. So it varies from organization to organization. So usually the organization will fix some standard. So you should follow like this, like that. So all the programmers in that organization will be working on that. If you go to some other organization, they will be following some other standards and all. So we will see the main constructs of pseudocode. So these are not generalized. You can use any syntax, but it is better to follow these constructs when you write the pseudocode. We have already seen there are sequence statements in programming language, or when you write algorithm and all, we have seen there is sequence statement. So in pseudocode also we have sequence construct. So it represents linear tasks sequentially performed one after the other. We have already seen what is a sequence statement called. Then we have while construct. We will see in detail how to write sequence statements and all. So there is a while construct in pseudocode. It is a loop with a condition at its beginning. So if we give some condition for a loop at the beginning, then it is known as while construct. Then there is another construct called repeat until. It is also a loop, but here the condition is at the bottom. So we will see what's the difference between this while and repeat until. Then for, it is also another way of looping. Then we have if then else. So we have already seen in algorithms you will be check if the remainder is 0, like that. So in those cases when you write the pseudocode, you can use this construct if then else. So it is a conditional statement changing the flow of the algorithm. Then we have case also. It is a generalization form of this if then else. So if we want to have multiple conditions, then we can have use this case. So we will see the examples and all, then you will understand. So these are the main constructs of the pseudocode. So you should also follow these constructs when you write the pseudocode, so that will be better. So we'll see what is a sequence kind of construct. So read height of a rectangle. So we have already seen in when you write the algorithm, you will be reading some value. Read A, read B, like that. You will be reading some values. So in sequence also, here in pseudocode also, we can use the keyword read. So usually all these constructs will be in capital letters. So we'll be using capital letters so that it will be easier to distinguish between the other things or other words in the pseudocode. So read is a construct or sequence construct. This is an example for sequence construct. Read height of a rectangle. This means you have to read some height value of a rectangle, or read width of a rectangle. Then you can compute area as height times width. So when you write a sequence operation, you can write like this: read height, read width of a rectangle, then compute area as height times width. So it is better to write like this rather than writing area equal to height into width. You should not follow like that. When you write pseudocode, you should write in plain English. So compute area as height times width. So we will see some of the common action words that are used in sequence statements. So for input, we will be using read or obtain or get. So here you have to see that we are using all caps for read, compute and all. Then for output, you can use print, display, show. All these will form output words, keywords. Then for compute, you can use compute, calculate, determine, like that. Any variables can be used or any keywords can be used. Then for initialize, you can use set or init. So it is to initialize some value. So we have already seen we'll be initializing some counter value. In some algorithm we have already seen we'll be using a counter and you will be initializing it to 1 or 0, or in some cases sum equal to 0 you will be initializing. So you can, in pseudocode you have to write, say set some value as 0, like that you have to write. Then add 1. So you have already seen you will be incrementing counter by 1. So for that you can use this increment. So increment counter, like that if you write, it will be a more understandable. So it becomes a pseudocode. Or you can use the word bump. Then we will see the second construct. So this is a sequence construct. So these are the keywords that will be used when we use this sequence construct. Then we have while construct. So it is used to specify a loop with a test at the top. So initially itself we are testing the condition, then we can use the while construct. So beginning and ending is indicated by two keywords, while and end while. So every construct will have an end also. So while and end while will be there. So general form is like this. So while, you can write some condition, some sequence. Sequence means a statement, a single statement or a set of statements, and end while. So end while means you have to end this thing. So while you will check some condition here. So that is why we have specified here. So it is used to specify a loop with a test at the top. So initially itself we will be testing the condition. So if the condition is true, all these sequence statements will be executed. And again, when it reaches here, again it will check whether the condition is true. If it is true, again it will repeat this action. So it is a looping. So it will continue until the condition becomes false. Okay, when the condition becomes false, it will go to the next statement after end while. So loop is entered only if the condition is true. So it will be entered only if the condition is true. Then sequence is performed for each iteration. So for each iteration, this sequence will be performed. So whenever the condition is true, all the sequence means it can be a single statement or a set of statements. So at the conclusion of each iteration, the condition is evaluated. So after ending, so if there are 5 statements, after those 5 statements are executed, again the condition will be checked. So if it is true, again those 5 statements will be executed. Like that, it will go on repeating like this. Loop continues as long as the condition is true. Okay, so that's a while construct. So I'll show some examples. So you should write like this when you use while construct. So if you want to use loop in a pseudocode, you can use this while construct. So while population less than limit, then compute population as population plus births minus death, like that, some formula or something you can write like this. And end while. So this will be repeated until this condition, population less than limit, becomes false. This is another example. So while employee.type not equal to manager and present count less than number of employees. So this is multiple conditions. Okay. So you don't worry about all these things. We won't be using all these constructs when you write this program and all. Then there is another looping statement called repeat until. So it is similar to the while loop. So only difference is except that the test is performed at the bottom of the loop instead at the top. So in the case of while, we will be testing the condition initially itself. But in the case of repeat until, we will be testing the condition at the end. So that means, so we will see the syntax. So this is syntax, repeat sequence until condition. So if you are using the syntax, so whenever it enters here, repeat, so all these sequence statements will be executed at least once, because we will not be checking the condition initially. So after executing one time, we will be checking whether the condition is true or false. So if it is false, it will again repeat, go on like this. So sequence of loop is always performed at least once. So that's the difference between while and repeat until. So in the case of while, the condition will be checked first. So here in the case of repeat until, the condition is checked last. So what happens is the sequence of statement. So it may be a single statement or multiple statements will work at least once. So at the conclusion of each iteration, the condition is evaluated. So loop repeats if the condition is false. So if the condition is false, the loop again repeats. And if the condition is true, the loop terminates. So that's the difference. So in the case of while, the loop is repeated until the condition becomes false. But here the condition this sequence of statements is repeated until the condition is true. So that is the difference between this while and repeat until. Okay. Then we have another looping statement. So this is the case. Hope it is clear now. So that is a difference. So here this sequence will be executed at least once. In the case of while, we won't be executing it as a statement. First it will be checking the condition. But here the condition is checked only after executing at least once. Then we have for looping. So it is a specialized construct for iterating a specific number of times, often called a counting loop. So if you want to execute a particular loop a particular number of times, so if I want to execute it 5 times, then you can use this for loop. So we have used 2 keywords, for and end for. So this is the general syntax: for iteration bounds, we will be specifying some iteration bounds, then there will be a sequence of operations, then end for. So this iteration bound will specify. So for example, for months not equal to 12, or months for all months, maybe 12 months are there. For all months, repeat this sequence. So first time, for the first month, the sequence will be executed. Like that, it will be going on repeating. So that those number of times, 12 number of times it will be repeating. I'll show an example. So I'll show two types of writing this for. This is one way of writing one example. So for x equal to 1 to 10. So this means x will be repeated 10 times. So x, initially x will take 1, then it will go inside this loop. Then for y equal to 1, so initially y will be taking 1, so it will go here, it will check whether while game board of, this is some program, this is part of some program, game board of y equal to 0, do nothing else. We are calling some other function, so you don't need to worry. I just want to show the syntax. It will somewhat look like this. So for this means this loop will be repeated 10 times. So first x will take one value, then after that x will take 2, like that. So when it reaches end for, so this is nesting actually. So there are two loops. You do not worry about nesting and all. When you write complex programs and all, you will understand what is this nesting and all. So in this way you can write this program. So you should give indentation also. So indentation is important in the case of when you write the pseudocode and all. If you see there is indented. So this for and end for. So this is indented in a particular space. So this for and end for will come like this. So if will be like this. If, end, if, else, everything. So inside if. So this means that inside if this statement will come. Inside else these two statements will be there. Like that. Inside this for we have all these statements. So it is to understand that thing. So indentation should be there when you write this pseudocode kind of thing. The same program can be written in a better way like this one. Set move count. So we are using set value. So set is to set some value. So move count to 1. Then for each row on the board, for each column on the board, like that. So it is some game board program. It's a part of some game board program. You need not worry about this, just to show how it would look like. So you can write it this way or this way. So this will be much more better. If you want, you can follow this way also in writing this for. Then we have another construct which is known as if then else. So it is a binary choice on a given Boolean condition. So it is indicated by the use of 4 keywords: if, then, else, and end if will be there. So the syntax will be like this. General format will be like this. If condition, then if this condition is true, then this sequence or this statement or a set of statements will be executed. If the condition is false, the else part will be executed. This set of statements will be executed. So it is not looping. It is not a looping statement. It is just a statement. So it is just a conditional statement. Okay, we won't loop it many times and all. It will check the condition one time. If it is true, this set of statements will be executed. If that condition is false, this set of else part will be executed. Okay. Then end if, then after that the next statement will be executed. So this is if then else. This is an example. If hours worked greater than normal maximum, then so if this condition is true, then this statement will be executed. Otherwise, if this condition is false, this else part will be executed and it will come out of the if statement. So this way you can write in pseudocode. Then there is another construct called case. So if we want to have multi-way branching, so in if then statements we have only single way branching. If it is true, it will be executed. If it is false, this will be executed. So, may be considered as binary branching. So here we have multi-way branching based on conditions that are mutually exclusive. So we use 4 keywords: case, of, others, and end case. And also we can use conditions: case, of, others, and end case. I'll show the general syntax. It will look like this: case, some expression. It may be some condition, case, expression, of. So if this condition, there will be several statements. So if there will be several values for this expression, so if we evaluate this expression, we will get some values. So if it is condition 1, if the expression evaluates to this condition, then this sequence will be executed. If this expression evaluates to condition 2, then sequence 2 will be executed. Like that, there can be n number of statements. So if this expression evaluates to condition n, so if this expression gives value n, then this sequence n will be executed. Or if it is not getting any of these values, then the default is there. That is why we are giving this others. So it is a default sequence. So we can write something in default. So if none of if the expression is evaluating to none of these values, then this default will be working. So this is an optional thing. Others is an optional thing. Others clause with its default sequence is optional. Actually, this is optional. We may or may not include this others. Okay, I'll show an example for this one. So this is an example. Case title of. So if the title is Mr., then you will print Mr. MR. If it is MR, you will print Mr. If it is MRS, you will print Mrs. If it is MISS, then you will print Miss. So we have not included the default thing. So this way you can write. So if the expression, so this title can be considered an expression. So it has multiple values. So these 5 values can be happen. So if these 5 values can happen. So if it is dr, if title equal to dr, then we will print doctor. I'll show another example. This is another thing. So if when you calculate the grade of a student and all, you can have several grades. So if the grade grade, if it is a grade is A, then we will simply say points equal to 4. If it is a grade is B, then points equal to 3, like that. If it is F, points equal to 0. So here also we are not included that default thing. Then there will be finally there will be an end case statement. So these are the different constructs that I use. So this is an example for nested constructs. Nested construct means inside one construct we can have another construct. So here inside this repeat, you can see that there is an if another statement here is there, if statement is there. Like that we can have provide any number of nesting. In the previous for also I have shown some nested construct and all. So this way you can have any number of nestings and all. Usually up to 3 nestings only you should give. Otherwise it will be very difficult to understand the code. Okay. So this is another example for repeat and until. You can see. So repeat. So here we are setting the total to 0. Then we are asking to repeat. So we are not checking the condition. So whatever be the condition, so all these statements will be executed at least once. After that only it will check whether temperature less than 0. So if the temperature is less than 0, then if it is true, then it will go to the next statement. If this is false, then again these statements will be repeated. Then we usually use this invoking when we want to include this functions and all. You will learn this. If you learn some programming language, you will understand what is this function and all later. So we'll come into this later. Anyway, we need not. I have just mentioned this. You not worry about this sub procedure and function and also and all these things. You can use this call. So call average age. So if you want to execute a particular block, some other block and all, you can use this call thing. And you're not worry about this thing. You leave this now. Then there are some rules of writing for writing the pseudocode. So one is always capitalize the initial word. Often one of the main 6 constructs. Usually one of the main 6 constructs will be the first word. If not, that is not the case, you should capitalize the initial word. The first word should be capitalized. So this is not a hardcore rules and all. You may or may not follow all these things. And only one statement per line. You should write only one statement per line. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to understand that thing. Then intent to show hierarchy improves readability and show nested constructs. So this is an example for this indentation. So if you see this, there it is indented. All these statements are indented at the same space. So this means all these statements belong to this repeat until statement. Then inside this if we have a single statement. So always provide this indentation kind of thing when you write this pseudocode. Then always end multi-line sections using any of the end keywords. So you should write end if, end while, should use that keyword. Then only you will be able to understand that if statement has been ended, or while loop has been ended. Then keep your statements programming language independent. So we should not think of any programming language when you write the pseudocode and all. So if people have already learned the C++ and all, they'll be writing something similar to that C code and C++ code. So you should not follow that kind of syntax when you write the pseudocode. It should be a generalized syntax. It should be programming language independent. Then using the naming domain of the problem, use the naming domain of the problem, not that of the implementation. Like this, you have to give append the last name to the first name. If you want to add last name to the first name, you should write it like this itself: append the last name to the first name, instead of name equal to first plus last. So this is something like a mathematical calculation, and all. You should not use this kind of syntax. You should write like this itself: append the last name to the first name. Then keep it simple, concise, and readable. And it should be readable also. It should be very simple and concise. So these are some of the general rules. It is not hardcore rules. You may or may not follow, but try to follow all these things when you write this pseudocode. Now you can try this to write this pseudocode. So in the previous two lectures, I have explained linear search and by bubble sort. So you can learn that linear search and bubble sort. You can leave that binary search now. Later, when you study C programming and all, we will be learning about binary searching. So now you should learn only linear search and binary bubble sort. Linear search and bubble sort. So you have to write the algorithm and pseudocode for this linear search, and also you have to write the algorithm and pseudocode for bubble sort. So you can see the previous two lectures to understand what is this linear search and what is this bubble sort. And after learning that linear search and bubble sort, you should write pseudocode using all these constructs you have learned. So you know how to write an algorithm. So after writing this algorithm, try to make it a pseudocode. So you can use all these constructs what you have studied. Okay. So try to do this exercise and post the classroom. So these are the references that I have used. Thank you.